Okay, here we are listening to going to listen, think about, analyze, contemplate, internalize, practice, if we can, these views coming from the Buddha's experience about reality, about existence. And the reason to, okay, good. The reason to listen is to take the tools so we can develop our potential, so we can help others. Thinking like this. So Venerable Jonathan's going to sing. You're going to sing it as well. Put the prayer on, please. Somebody who's the boss here. Put the Saji Perky, the mandala offer on. And Venerable Jonathan's going to offer on behalf of the center, offer a mandala, the context of the universe. Just use your creative imagination, think of all the marvelous things of the world and pile them all up and offer them to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. Sangye Jingdu Mikte Ulwagi Drokon Namjag Shingla Chapasho. And you want to sing this one too? Go. Tername Tukuterabten Chingnam Ka Tinle Chokchu Yepadang Lozang Tenpe Renme Sasungi Drowe Munsel Taktu Negyuchi. Imagine Buddha happily receives our offering. Say, go. Guru Rachna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. Okay. All right. Okay, no, leave it there. It's auspicious. Leave it right there. Leave it here. Leave it here. The mandala. Come here. Leave it here. Why not? All right. Okay. So as I've been saying, I think, oh, we should do the refuge prayer as well. Just think. I know, but it's too busy on there. Okay, what to do? Leave it there. Think, this next prayer, say it in English. Think, you know, these two lines, first two lines are reminding us of our reliance on the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, for those of us who are committed, reiterating that reliance. I take refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And the second two lines are expressing our motivation, which I said before, really. Listen to develop ourselves, we can help others, all the way to Buddhahood. And that's expressing that. So think that, and that's enough. That's done. That's it, leave it, done. Did it sort of quickly. Finished. Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so the fact of it is, as we've been talking, I'm sure, and I'll say it again, Buddha's essential point is his key point is that he's found the methods to stop suffering. That's what he's saying. In other words, a nicer way to put it, more exciting, is he's found the method to get happy. And that's really what he's saying. We get so obsessed about suffering, don't we? But he's found a method to get happy. That's quite a shocking concept. I think we paid $10 billion for that if we thought it was true. We just kind of wing it, I think, on the planet. He's found methods to get happy. So, of course, it's a radical method he's found, because finally, a happy mind is a Buddha's mind. So that does not exist in our modern culture. It does not exist even in Christianity. It does not exist in Islam, with respect. The best happiness there is to be in God, the God realms with God. Pretty good. That's pretty good happiness. But the Buddha would suggest that's where he diverged from the Hindus, that doesn't last. The Hindus have similar view. You know? They also had the view of kind of being more subtle level of mind, that for them was liberation. But for him, he thought that was, he's found there's still some subtle neuroses in the mind. So he diverged in his own direction. So basically a Buddha mind is the main goal. But even before that, there's the goal of achieving liberation from suffering, which another word to put it is happiness. And that's the bliss of, as they call it, the bliss of nirvana. It's not some place like heaven. It's your mind when it's unencumbered utterly, when you have removed utterly the delusions. Then you're out of samsara. You no longer have to be coming back with bodies, you know, bags of bones. That's the happiness he's talking about. And then you add the compassion wing to that, the bodhicitta, and you become this outrageously, insanely powerful being called a Buddha, who's able to help others. That's what he's saying. So that's kind of, it's like a long way to go, you know? But that's our potential. He's found, in other words, using the Mahayana perspective, he's found that our true nature is that. That's who we really are. That's who we really are. That's our true nature. That's who we really are. That's our potential. So if that's true, then every single word in Buddha's explanations and his path and his teachings and his methods is to get us there. That's the point, isn't it? And then even more delicious is when you look at, as I always quote, look at the etymology of the Tibetan equivalent of the word Buddha, Sangye. Sang implies the eradication from that mind of all the neuroses and the delusions, which are the cause of suffering, which prevent us from being happy. And then the other syllable, ge, implies the development to perfection of everything else in the mind, the virtues and wisdom. That's Buddhahood. So given that, given those things, then it follows logically the method. It tells us the method right there. It tells us the method right there. And that implies too, what he's saying is that in the source of suffering and therefore the source of happiness is in the mind. So this is true. We better know what he means by the mind. That's why Lama Zopa, when he started teaching the hippies, you know, back in the 70s, all the people coming from the West mostly who have the assumption that their mind is their brain, which I had to point out right at the beginning, no, we're not talking about that here. We're talking about this beginningless continuity of mental moments, which is not physical, which is not the handiwork of a creator, nor of your mummy and daddy. Big surprise. And this endless, the Mahayana view also, the end is endless. It's endless, beginningless and endless. It's such a weird concept for us. This is what he's, and where this information comes from is his own mind, his own observation. He came through this incredible Indian system, these genius Indians who invented this technique called, it enabled us to achieve this state of mind called samadhi, concentration, at a level of subtlety that we do not posit as existing in the modern world, you know, no question. And the Hindus already found methods to stop the grosser suffering. They already found methods to stop the subtle level of suffering, giving up attachment, but not the third one, not the final 3 levels of suffering. What are the 3 levels of suffering? So the whole path then, the whole path, and the way our teacher lays it out in the 11th century, which Tsongkhapa uses as the basis of all his Lam Rim literature, you know, it's described in 3 stages of cultivation, 3 levels of practice and teachings. Gradual, like all bodies of knowledge that you learn it gradually, step by step, and then you complete it and graduate as a musician, as an artist, as a musician, as a mathematician, as a Buddha. So each of those 3 scopes of practice, Rinpoche actually calls it, he says the first lot is the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the least capability, and I like to call that junior school, only because it kind of, we get that concept, whatever you might call it in American, you get the idea. Then you've got the middle scope, or the, as Rinpoche would say, the teachings and practices suitable to the student of the middle capability, high school, whatever you want to call it. And then you've got university, teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the greatest capability. So getting rid of suffering and getting happiness, achieving nirvana, liberation is the first 2. That's the wisdom wing of the bird. You quit you quit the delusions and you stop all the causes. You stop the causes of being reborn in samsara. You're just on that path. First and second, junior school and high school. So now for that, in the Lam Rim, The main purpose of this first and second scopes is to get renunciation of suffering and its causes, to give up suffering and its causes. So the key thing here is it's not all the way. This is to stop harming others, abide by the laws of karma, and then to get into your mind and start seeing attachment in particular. But as far as Buddha is concerned, attachment is the main cause of suffering in day-to-day life. It's the main cause of all these realms of existence we live in. It's kind of primordial. Of course, the root delusion is the root one, ego grasping. We're dealing here with karma, first level, and then the mind. So you get this incredible, by working here, you get this incredible sense of being sick of suffering, and knowing with confidence that it's your mind, the delusions, the neuroses, the fabrications, the fantasies, the made-up stories. You have this deep wish to get rid of suffering, which means you have to see the suffering. You have to be vomiting at the thought of the suffering. You're sick to death of it. So this energizes you to want to give it up. This is what we would call self-compassion. Then you're driven to want to go now to the next level, which is you start to develop bodhicitta. You start to realize that everybody's in the same boat. You shift your emphasis from you to others. You still keep working on your mind, there's no question. Then you get this profound, insane, developed mind of a bodhisattva. Kind of almost hard to talk about to me. It's too difficult. Then you now perfect this. You'll perfect the two wings of the bird in the life after life after life on the bodhisattva path. You're now ready to practice, to perfect the compassion wing. So you go bopping life after life in relation to sentient beings, perfecting generosity, morality, patience, and perseverance. The first 4 of these 6 perfections of the bodhisattva. And this is where you relate to sentient beings, constantly working on your mind, ripping out delusions, continuing to rip out delusions, continuing to rip out particularly the self-cherishing, to rip them out and put others first, perfecting that and connecting with, life after life, connecting with, making karmic connection with countless sentient beings. You want to meet them again and again and lead them to enlightenment when they're ready. So you hook them. And then on your cushion, you perfect the wisdom wing. And the 2 teachings that you would use as a Hinayana practitioner on the wisdom wing, once you've got renunciation on the Hinayana path, because we share those teachings, you would then get samadhi, and you would then, with that state of mind, that shine, that concentration, you would then get the realization of emptiness. And that's what gets you out of suffering. But here on the Mahayana path, they are taken out from there and put at the end, the tail end of the 6 perfections. And now you perfect those on your cushion in conjunction with the first 4, where you're perfecting the compassion wing. And they're taught in the context of the bodhisattva path. Because actually, if you've got concentration and wisdom, even just concentration, the bliss of samadhi is inconceivable. You'd forget all about sentient beings. Who would care? You wouldn't. So, but with bodhicitta, this unbelievable, insane levels of love and compassion, you can't lose. You can't lose it. You can't lose it. You can lose actually until a certain level. You can even lose bodhicitta. But you've got stable, incredible concentration. And then with this, you happily want to achieve realization of emptiness so you can get the hell out of samsara, so you can become a Buddha, and then you're qualified to help sentient beings. So what drives you? What drives you to become a Buddha? What drives you to want to get wisdom here in this place is compassion. On the Hinayana path, what drives you is to get the hell out of suffering. Good enough, but you'll forget about sentient beings. Okay. Not being rude, it's not sectarian, it's just psychologically discussing. So renunciation, bodhicitta, wow, they're the first 2. And then with this profound sense of compassion, this is the main cause of becoming a Buddha. And with that motivation, you want to realize emptiness as quickly as possible. And then that's why you enter the tantric path. You've heard of methods to whiz you to enlightenment super quick. Not because you're lazy. No, bodhisattva would crawl on all 4 legs, all 4 limbs from here to eternity for the sake of sentient beings. But if you can fly there quicker, clearly you would. You're not stupid. So what drives the wish to get the hell out of samsara? What drives the wish to become a Buddha is compassion. What drives the wish in the first stages is get out of samsara. Pretty good. You know, and even as you, and even if you are on that path and you get rid of the delusions, already you've got compassion and love. I mean, your mind doesn't disappear when you get rid of the delusions. Your mind is full of bliss and clarity and compassion. You've got tremendous compassion, of course you have. But because life after life after life, your motivation is to get out of samsara, then in this particular life when you've finally achieved your nirvana, you remove all the obstacles of liberation. At the time of your death, your compassion will be overridden by your bliss and your motivation to get out of samsara. And you zap into bliss and don't come back. And a few years later, Buddha comes along and taps you on the shoulder and says, come on, honey child, get back on the Mahayana path and now become a Buddha so you can benefit others. And as Geshe Tashi Sering in Queensland one time said, that giving up that bliss is the worst suffering in the universe. There's even a teaching of the Buddha, even a teaching where he gave all these Hinayana Arhants teachings about Tantra, and they got wrong view and freaked out. Something like, we've got reborn in the hell realms for a few eons. Manjushri said, no, don't worry about it. They would have spent less time in the hell realms than they would in nirvana. So quicker. Sounds pretty cruel, isn't it? Did you understand that? No? I'll say it again. Okay. Okay. One time the Buddha gave teachings to Hinayana practitioners and he told them about Tantra. And they got wrong view because it's not part of their path. They got wrong view. So because of that, they went to the hell realms. And Manjushri said, well, this is awful, you know. He said, no, don't worry about it, because the time they spent in the hell realms by hearing about Tantra was less time than they would have spent in the bliss of nirvana having not heard about Tantra. So better that they spent years in the hell. That's what I'm saying. I mean, it sounds a bit intense, right? So, okay, so what is it about the mind then? What has it got to do? What is the mind? What's that got to do with the price of fish? Because it's not how we think in the world. We know we have therapists and good people, and we know we can feel better by going to therapists and make ourselves more happy. We know that. But Buddhism, you know, it's not, but in our culture, we know the mind does play some role, but there's no view in psychology or neuroscience where they say the mind is the key player. That's pretty radical. That's Buddha's thing. And that really needs thinking about. Because initially it doesn't seem right. It seems, no, it can't be right. But it's right there in the Four Noble Truths. His first teaching, which is really the presentation of the wisdom ring, not about compassion. He says the second noble truth is the two main causes of suffering. It's very simple, main ones. There are thousands of causes, the two main ones. It's right there. We don't like it. They're both inside us. Right there. It's right. They're both inside us. This is too shocking. We argue with it. We don't believe it. We can't cope. It's too difficult. They're both inside us. The two main causes. Very simple. Which doesn't mean, so of course, as soon as we hear that, we miss out the word main. And then we say, oh, you mean if someone punches you in the nose, it's got nothing to do with your suffering? He's not saying that. You know, he's not saying that. We don't hear it properly. A bit fundamentalist, you know. The usual view is the main cause of my suffering is a punch in the nose. And my mind plays no role at all. That's our usual view. That's the view of samsara. The dualistic view the Buddha says is a complete fabrication, not in touch with reality at all. So he says the two main causes of my suffering, and equally flip it over to make us feel better, the two main causes of my happiness. Okay, yes, use that as an example, just the same. As far as we're concerned, the main cause of my happiness is my boyfriend giving me something and looking at me with incredible love and saying I'm the nicest person on the planet. That is definitely the main cause of my happiness. And we hunger after that. So we think, my God, I've found happiness. I can't believe it. Of course we think that. Naturally. No one teaches us that. It feels this way. And all Buddha's saying is, that's because of attachment. Never mind, but we know that, we believe that's true. So all Buddha's saying is, no, Ravina. The main cause of your happiness is one is karma, two. That means one, like we talked yesterday, is you must have done some virtuous actions in the past that sow positive seeds in your mind that now, on the basis of meeting the condition called kind boyfriend, triggers in you a pleasant feeling. And even the cause of even meeting the boyfriend, and him smiling at you and saying he adores you, is the best person on the planet. That's the fruit. Those words and meeting him is the fruit of your past virtue. And second, the pleasure that arises in your mind is the fruit of your past virtue. And the second cause is the virtuous state of mind. So the action, karma, and then the mind, virtuous state of mind. That's it. It's clear, simple, uncomplicated, right there. We, as even as Buddhists practicing for years, we still find it hard to believe. They must play some role. We can't hear it. We can't hear it. It's right there. That's his finding. We take it as a hypothesis. Of course, to practice that and do it first thing is impossible, because the habit of believing the external world is the cause of my happiness and my suffering is pretty old. You've got to, it's like you've been believing in 1 + 1 is 3 for 42 eons. You've got to now hear this other one and take it as your hypothesis and write it down. 1 + 1 is 2. Of course you don't believe it first. It's going to take you a while to unpack the lie. You've got to put it down there. Oh, cause of my suffering. So Dundrup punches me in the nose and I'll get angry and punch him back. Ravina, sorry, you forgot. First cause of that, how come I even meet Dundrup and his punch is I must have harmed him. And second, the delusion that drove it. That's it, simple practice. But we scream and yell and fight and can't cope and have mental breakdowns and argue with it. Too difficult for us. Kind of got to be autistic about it. Oh, I see, that's the cause of happiness. Good, okay, I'll try. Instead of arguing, I'll be communicating. You don't have to like Buddha's view. No one's asking you to. If you do like Buddha's view, you've got to practice this. You've got to put it down, write down. You've got to write it down. You forget. The number of people in Buddhist centers who argue with you and fight, he did this and she did that. It's his fault, not my fault. We forget the teaching. We forget the instruction. It's right there. We forgot. It's very hard, because it's hard, because everything in our being sees the opposite. So in other words, we're believing in 1 + 1 is 3 for so long. When you put one orange plus another orange, you will see 3. You see 3. You've made it up for so long. You see 3. That in Lama Zopa is having a wrong view about something. But the worst part is that it appears that way, because for so long have we believed it to be that way. We have massive vested interest in keeping it that way. So the Buddha is saying main cause of happiness and suffering is your mind, babe. Because karma comes down to the mind anyway. The mind. Mind is the source of everything. That's what it says in the teaching, but we just can't hear it because it's too ridiculous. Because we believe the opposite, that's why. So we've got to think about it logically. Hypothesize it first logically. That's what I think it's important to say. We tend to think I should believe it. No, I don't believe a single damn thing Buddha says. It's just ignorance. But hypothesize the possibility it's true. And the fact is, even if you're just learning 1 + 1 is 2, you've got to write it down first. You've got to say the words first. That's what it means by taking it as your hypothesis. You've got to say 1 + 1 is 2, write it down. You don't know what it means yet, but you've got to start with what someone is telling you is the truth that you are prepared to have confidence in. You don't know it's true yet. You've got to take that. So it means you've got to check on the Buddha. You've got to check on that mathematician. Some bloke tells you 1 + 1 is 2. You've never heard it before. So you've got to check on that person. Anyone can tell you anything. Don't believe anybody. But check on their credentials. That's the first step. That's why you've got a very first step is check on the Buddha. Who is this person? What does he mean these words he's saying? And you check on his validity. So you have to do that. You must do that. Here's some doctor who can heal something. You check on their validity. You check on their history. You check on the people, their history, their colleagues, their peers. You must do that. You've got to do that because you can't start otherwise. Because you can't prove that 1 + 1 is 2 until you first hypothesize it. This is really logical. You've got to start with a thought. You've got to start with a thought. The first thing we hear is, oh no, can't be true. So we don't even begin with the thought, the cause of my happiness and suffering is my mind. We don't, oh no, can't be possible, not possible, don't be ridiculous. No. So you've got to start with a thought. We don't just choose any thought. Check on this person called Buddha so you've got the confidence to say, okay, I'm prepared to work on that. So you write it down first. You have the thought first. Then you prove it. This experience. That's how you prove 1 + 1 is 2. It's very clear. Because we live at a conceptual level. So we have to use our conceptuality. to use our conceptuality as a method to get to the direct experience, which is beyond conceptual. It's a method. It's like you learn a theory about 1 + 1 is 2. It's a concept, pure concept. You take it and work with it and prove the truth of it experientially, and now you have the truth of it in your mind. That's how we learn everything. Same here. If you forget the words, if you forget the theory, the main cause of your suffering is your karma in your mind, then how can you prove it? Just rant and rave and shout at it. You need to have it, this conceptual thought first. That's why I think it's important. I like to say that, it's true. If you think about it, any body of knowledge, whether it's acupuncture, music, math, Buddhism, a body of knowledge, not a bunch of random, hippy-trippy feelings, which is how we think about spiritual philosophy. Well, I can believe what I like, we say. Sort of like made up. Any body of knowledge, if it is true, if it's valid, this valid body of knowledge, that means you can first prove it theoretically. It has to be true. It has to be true. That has to be true. That has to be true. So don't just dump. Don't throw out theory. It's the first step. It's the first step. The first step. You can't prove you can't have the experience of 1 + 1 is 2 if you haven't first thought the words. You can't possibly make a cake if you haven't first learned the recipe. If you think you can just go to the fridge and get out some, things, you don't even know there's flour or eggs there because you've never heard the theory. And just look at a cake. Okay, think about this. Look at a cake. You've never heard of flour. You've never heard of chocolate. You've never heard of eggs or milk or ovens and heat. You've never heard of it. Think about that, and you look at a cake. It would take you 1,000 years and $1 billion to find the recipe, wouldn't it? Think about that. Some clever person's done it before. So don't waste your breath. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. Take the theory, check on the person first, and then you put it into practice and prove it for yourself. It's so simple. That's all we're doing here. It's hard to do that because we haven't got that much intelligence. We don't have concentration. We don't study that much. Most things go in one ear and out the other. We do our best. They say, there's this nice method. When you study the philosophy, they say there's this nice process you go through to get to direct experience of the truth of something. The first step is you begin with what they call wrong view. 1 + 1 is 2. Nah, that'd be ridiculous, No, I think acupuncture is a good one. You've heard about people putting needles in, This is like 60 years ago in Santa Fe. Maybe some weird wacko hippie or might have put a needle in somebody. They were all secret. They had this knowledge. Wow, they must be so amazing. But most people thought it was stupid. The first thing you hear about putting a needle in someone to heal them, you'd laugh, what a stupid load of rubbish. And then say you keep hearing about it. You've got an open mind. So you start with wrong view. Don't be ridiculous. Then you keep hearing it, and you're prepared to listen. So you keep hearing people talk about acupuncture, and you start to move to the next step, which is called doubt. But doubt still tending towards the wrong view. You go, maybe it's true. No, it can't be true. But you keep hearing it. Your mind's open. And then you start hearing more, and you start to have doubt now tending towards the right view. Or maybe acupuncture could be right, You've all just got doubt, but you're moving away from this fundamentalist wrong view. Now you start to look at it. You start to look into it, and you start to have now what they call, this is pretty intense already, from a lot of study of it, theoretically, you get correct belief, they call it. It's already pretty profound. And you keep studying it. I'm not even discussing putting needles in people yet. I know, of course, you would start doing that immediately, but imagine you're not. I'm looking at this of a body of knowledge being coherent, theoretically. So you learn the theories, you learn the theories, you learn the theories. You keep putting it together, and more you hear, more and more you join the dots. That makes sense in this one. In the beginning, it's just a bunch of sort of separate bits of knowledge, and you can't see the coherence of. But slowly, as you keep joining the dots, literally joining the dots is a really good way to put it. It becomes coherent, theoretically. And then eventually get to what they call, and this is a really profound realization, inferential certainty, which is conceptual, inferential certainty. And I think you can even pass an exam on the theories of acupuncture without putting a needle in anybody. If it's a valid body of knowledge, then you start to prove it by doing it. And that's experience, direct experience. Or even a more simple example, like you hear about a place called Melbourne, and you've never looked at a map, you've never heard of geography. Don't be ridiculous, can't be such a place. Same process. And finally you get there. Then that's the proof. Any body of knowledge, if it's valid, must be first coherent theoretically. Must be. That fits our scientific minds. Well, that's, this is what we have to do with the Dharma. That's exactly what they're doing. They spend 25, 30 years in the monastic university system doing that. Of course, you combine it with practice as you go. Of course you do. Acupuncture the same. Cooking the same. But you can still isolate the theories as a coherent body of knowledge. That makes sense to our minds. We never think body of religious knowledge is like that, and reasonably because it's coming from a creator, and he doesn't need to tell us what his views are. We have faith in him. That's okay, but that's not what we're saying here. You can have faith in 1 + 1 = 2 till the cows come home, but if you don't know it, you're in trouble. That's what faith is. We never say I believe in 1 + 1 = 2. You never say that. But it's been proved. But we'll say, but it's science. It's been proved. Yeah, Einstein's proved it. Have you? No, you haven't. So it's just faith for you. We never think that. We say, oh yeah, relativity is true because Einstein has proved it. But have you proved it? So therefore, it's faith for you only. We never think that. So it's the same with Buddha. He's proved enlightenment. So that's why you have some confidence. You take it as your hypothesis and you go towards it yourself, one step at a time. As the Dalai Lama says, if you keep practicing step by step, checking the boxes as you go, and you then get to a point where you actually do prove that what Buddha says is wrong, you must reject him. That's wisdom. It's the kind of rigor and clarity we aim for, we wish to have. Keep it on the earth, And of course, all these other practices we do that doesn't seem to have anything to do with all this. I mean, I was a Catholic. I did prayers and stuff. I mean, I'd do more prayers and more practices looking like religion than I ever did as a Catholic, as a Buddhist. So what's their function? I get very confused about all this. So even that's all based in logic. We can't hear it initially. It's all based in logic. If you posit the view, there is a mind that's enlightened, the end result of all the work. That mind is not physical. It is pervading wherever there is existence. It can't not be pervading wherever there is existence. It has omniscience. The function of mind is to know that which exists. It's its job. So when you posit all that, then prayer makes sense. Buddha's full of compassion. You just say, please help me. You say that to a doctor and they help you. You say that to the Buddha, it's their job as well. Just a little more subtle, that's all. Same logic, but we don't see it. So the bottom line for the Buddha then is that what goes on in the mind is the main source of happiness and suffering. It's actually the source of the universe, all universes. And this is based, of course, on the Vajrayana model of the universe being there are minds and there's matter, the 4 elements. So, okay, if then what's in the mind is the main source of suffering, we have to see what those types of states of mind are. And they're the ones that are not in sync with reality. And so what we're doing in the entire Lam Rim, one way of putting the entire Lam Rim is the first stage is all the way up to concentration, the 5th of the 6 perfection. That's all conventional phenomena. That's presenting how things exist conventionally, starting with impermanence, karma, the mind, bodhicitta, perfections, up to concentration. That getting in touch with all of that getting realizations of all of that. That's getting understanding of the conventional reality of the universe, of reality, the convention, how things exist conventionally. So before we realize how things exist ultimately, you have to understand how they exist conventionally. That's the basis. And so one way of saying the entire Lama is getting clear about how things exist conventionally. So the very first one, the essence of the first step is really about karma. So what's the misconception there? Well, no cause and effect. Or a creator. They're both misconceptions, Buddha says. Or that your mind is the brain. Misconception, he says. He's not being rude. He's telling us what he has found to be true. And it's up to us whether we decide to work with that. No one's forcing us. Then you get to the second scope, he goes into the nature of mind, what it is, how it functions, the delusions, the virtues, and that, he says, the view we have now, you know, all these other views, they're misconceptions. So we get clear about their reality. Then we get to the bodhisattva path. Then we get to the six perfections. Then we get to concentration, all of this. And then we're ready now. Finally, the mind is primed easily to get to see how those conventional things exist. Finally, their true nature. So this framework, a delicious framework, Tsongkhapa praises the way that things exist conventionally, dependent arising. He praises Lord Buddha's teachings on this. This is blissful, poetic prayer that is written text in praise of dependent arising. He's praising the Buddha for his incredible teachings on dependent arising. And there are many logical reasons we have to use to realize emptiness, to realize finally how things exist. But the king of logic, as Lama Zopa says, is dependent arising. So let's look at it. And look at other reasons too, a little bit, touching on a little bit, just a little bit. I only know a little bit. So, okay, when you first study Buddhist philosophy, usually the first text you study is called Collected Topics, or Dura. And it's a presentation of like all the, it's sort of like the structure of the Buddhist worldview, all the terminology, nuts and bolts. First this, and then this, and six of this, and phenomena, and then divided into permanent, impermanent, and six of this, and the mind, and divided into this, and this, and this. It's the whole entire structure. It's really great, you know, it's delicious. It's the first philosophical text I studied. So the very first one is you present, well, it's actually the second, never mind the first one. This is really effectively the first. You present the terminology for what exists. There are 5 or 6 synonyms for that which exists. And why is that important? Because Buddha's telling us he wants us to get in touch with that which exists. And why is that? Because he says right now we're living in La La Land, believing in things that don't exist. We're believing in non-existence, existence, things that don't exist. So the first one is that which exists. And there are 5 synonyms: phenomenon, object, object of knowledge, existent, established base, something like that. So there are trillions of phenomena, conventional phenomena. One division of existence is into conventional and ultimate, okay? So there's trillions of phenomena, things, you know, tables and chairs and carpets and people and noses and trillions of phenomena. And we can almost, I think I joke and almost say that since Steve Jobs, we've tripled the phenomena in the universe just with the apps, you know. All these new phenomena we keep creating every day that didn't exist before him. We could say like that, or before computers. All these clever, intelligent minds, we keep creating new things, new phenomena. So how do you define a phenomenon? What is a phenomenon? How do you say that something does exist? This is your starting point. What is something? How do you define it? How do you establish something as existing conventionally before you even begin to discuss it? This is a big trouble in the universe now, is blur, vomit. The conspiracy theories and the dramas and people's vomit out the mouth. Everybody could have a thought, we plonk it out there. It's almost like we've all become our own ists, you know. I'm a Rabinaist and Charlene's a Charleneist and John Drup's a John Drupist. I'm allowed to make up my view of the reality. We have no basis, no logic, no proof, just blur, you know. Exhausting. Because I feel it. Must be true because I feel it. Okay, so what a phenomenon. You know, each of the definitions is slightly different, but the definition of an existent, what proves an existent to be an existent is that it can be cognized by mind. I mean, this is insane. A valid mind, of course, a valid state of mind. That is what defines something as existing, that it can be cognized by the mind. That's the opposite in our culture. We don't give any credence at all to the mind. The brain, yeah, it's hard, we can see it. But internal stuff is just for us wishy-washy. I think psychology in the West is the lowest on the totem poles of all the sciences. So the opposite for the Buddha. So how do you establish something that is an established base? How do you decide before you begin to discuss its conventional reality and then finally its ultimate reality? You've got to first establish it as existing. Same example every time. What's that, Mummy? Darling, it's called a thermos. Let's say. That's the label. That's the name. You've got to have label first. You've got to name it first. Can't escape that. Oh, I don't like labels. Well, if you don't have labels, you won't even speak. Say you want a cup of tea, but I don't believe in labels. You go, how do I know you want a bloody cup of tea? You've got to have labels, and labels are names. Oh, I don't want to call it tea. It's a label. So it's a thermos. Then you ask her, what is it? Please give me the definition, Mummy. And she will tell you, usually, I think you can say a definition has two parts. I've heard differently, but this is one way. The first part is telling you its conventional characteristics. Well, she'll say, look at it, it's a flat-bottomed metal, and it's a container. Or flat-bottomed metal thing, You see that? But you've got to hear the second part, because that tells you what it is, what its function is, what its job is. Function, job, what is it? Its meaning, even. What is the, but Mummy, what's its meaning? She'll say, it keeps my tea warm. Now, we would just believe anything anyone tells us. Don't believe her. She has to prove it. She has to prove it. It's not difficult. She'll take off the lid, she'll get a cup of tea, and she will pour. She'll put the lid back on, and we'll come back 2 hours later, and we'll pour it out, and oh, look, she just proved it. The tea is still warm. Now we are saying, that not even yet is that a valid cognition. Not even yet could we have established it. We now have to make sure in our world there's no other definition for the same thing that contradicts that, because you'd be in trouble, If one person calls that a toilet and it's in their dictionary, and then one person calls it a cup, you'd be in trouble when you communicate. So you better get clear. This is conventional reality. It's reasonable. It's common sense. Why we fight and argue is because we have different definitions. I say, oh, I love you, and you say, oh, I love you, and we actually think we're communicating. If we wrote down our little kind of thing, we've got two different worlds of existence. You've got a very different definition from me. We don't define our terms. No wonder we fight. No clarity whatsoever. We can see that. So you establish things as existing, and now, that's how you conventionally establish them. Now we can begin to prove it ultimately. Because what you're trying to do ultimately is you're trying to look for the inherent keeper of keeper of warm tea. Keeps my tea warm. What's the noun there? What's the noun? How do you make that a noun? Keeper of tea warm. The thing that you have to prove, you have to find. This is the point. We've established it conventionally. It is that conventionally. Okay, now what Buddha's saying is we don't realize we make a big mistake then. We have this ignorance in the mind, this root delusion, this root ignorance, this primordial maripa. So primordial we can't see it. As soon as we say validly there is a black thermos, and the definition is a thing that keeps my tea warm, we don't realize it. But what ignorance is doing is over exaggerating the very ontological status itself of the keeper of tea warm. The keeping of, I can't get the noun, but turning into a noun. How do you do it? I mean, like if I say it's a holder of tea, it holds my tea. So it's a holder of tea. So a thing that keeps my tea warm. How do you say that as a noun? Someone help me. A tea who? No, but it's the warm part's the point. Keeping it warm. That's the definition of a thermos. It keeps it hot. So the keeper of hot tea. Okay. We have to find. So we believe that conventionally is true, but we don't realize as ignorance in us is decorating, as Lama Zopa is decorating on top of it a characteristic that it doesn't have, which is an inherent keeper of my tea warm. an inherent thermos, an inherent keeper of heating, that one. I can't think of the noun phrase. We don't realize, we don't realize we do that. That's the point. We don't realize we're doing that automatically. So right now in the world, we might be true, that's red, that's blue, that's pink, that's Charlene. What we don't realize is the ignorance in us is painting a picture on top of Charlene, on top of the pink and the red and the thermos, inherent in itself from its own side, having, first of all, in general terms, having nothing to do with all its parts, having nothing to do with any causes, but finally, crucially, having nothing to do with my mind. Out there from its own side, separate, inherent, intrinsic, independent of causes, independent of parts, independent of the mind calling it that. So in the ultimate one, we have to analyze, to look for that inherent thing. He tells us in advance it doesn't exist like that, but we have to prove it. We have to prove it. Got to squeeze your brain, as Lama Zopa says. But you can't look for an inherent thermos if you don't know what a thermos is conventionally. So another phenomenon that exists is called I, me, person, myself, self. They are all synonyms. They're all terms used to refer to a phenomenon like this. A dog is one of those. A Buddha is one of those. A hell being is one of those. An ant. All mind possessors are one of those. For some reason, Buddha's not called a sentient being. I don't know why. So all of, including the Buddha, are known as persons. But all sentient beings, all mind possessors are persons, are I's, are selves, are me's, are myself. Those words refer to that kind of phenomenon. So I forget what the definition is of an I. I can't remember. I can't remember what the definition is. I don't know. Maybe it's one that, I think it's the definition of a person is one that creates karma. That can't be true for the Buddha. I don't know. I'm sorry, I can't know what the definition is. So, we start. So we have to pretend we know the definition. And this is where we can say we're a mind possessor. That's true. We possess a mind. The difference between a dead body and a live one is the presence of mind. Okay. So, then what Buddha's saying is, like with the thermos, same with the I. When we say the word I, or when we say the word computer, or anything at all, any word at all, any name at all, anything at all, we make this, we might be even correct conventionally, but we make this mistake that, as Rinpoche says, all the delusions, all the misconceptions, including the branch ones, the emotional ones like attachment and anger and jealousy, those, mental afflictions, mental misconceptions, emotional misconceptions, they all make mistakes. These are the misconceptions of these states of mind for the Buddha are the cause of all suffering, of all universes since beginningless time. So he's found methods of how to get them out of the mind. That's the point. So the way they function, they misrepresent things to us. They misrepresent things back to us. And they all just, one way they make a mistake is they embellish, they exaggerate, they distort. As Lama Zopa says, all the delusions decorate on top of what is there, layers upon layers of characteristics that aren't there, but we don't see it. Just like that example I used, same with 1 + 1 is 3, or a $50 note. For so long, you believe because of attachment that it's 500. But even now, when a $50 note's on the table, it appears back to you as 500 because you believed it for so long. That's the killer about samsara, And we don't realize we're making a mistake. Because we believe everything that appears to us is existing in the way we see it. We think it's in the thing, not in our mind. That's the point the Buddha's making. Projection, it's a nice term in the West. We project our own neuroses onto the thing, onto the person, and think it's in the person. And I'm this innocent victim, you know. Nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with my mind, in other words. That's the worst mistake. That's the worst mistake. So that's why we start in the first scope. The second scope, dealing with the emotional afflictions, trying to identify attachment. So first Buddha gets us in the Lam Rim, teacher gets us to try to see the pain of attachment, to want to give it up. But when we start to understand it, we start to see the deeper level is the way it functions to exaggerate the deliciousness of the thing, the object, you know. And that's that attachment, that coming from a painful feeling of not being enough, then yearns for something or someone, and then that attachment then exaggerates, paints on top of that person all these qualities that we feel somehow make me whole. And then we paint on top of them the responsibility to make me feel whole. We expect it of them. We paint that picture. We believe we believe our picture is the objective truth. So of course it's suffering. We all recognize it as the most unbearable pain. So that's the painful part, but the delusional part is the one that makes the mistake. So it exaggerates. The degree of our emotional hunger is equal to the degree of the exaggeration of the beauty of it. So this is the branch delusions, getting used to how they lie. That's already incredible. This prepares us now for the subtle lie, the subtlest lie, the hardest lie to see. So when you see the cake and attachments prevailing, this emotional hunger projects onto that brown triangle. Validly, it is a chocolate cake. You are correct. But it dumps onto it a quality of deliciousness. It looks so appealing, doesn't it? It looks so delicious. And it's when you've got strong attachment, it's unbearable not to have it. The pain of just leaving it there and not having contact is unbearable. We know that. You know? So we believe, so attachment in our mind is what makes it look delicious. So this is still really tricky, because you can still objectively say, according to the rules of chocolate cake making, it is the best chocolate cake. You can still say that. This projection of attachment doesn't cancel out a good chocolate cake. That's the hard part. But the attachment exaggerates. Now, ignorance underneath attachment, the root delusion that informs all the other delusions, this marigpa, this ignorance, this primordial mistake, primordial misconception, is informing also at the same time. And what that's causing the delicious chocolate cake is to appear from its own side out there. So attachment projects deliciousness. Ignorance projects inherent deliciousness, intrinsic deliciousness, delicious cake having nothing to do with my mind seeing it. They all work together. So first one is start not believing in the attachment story. Calm that one down. That's already tremendous practice. So now we can start to attack the root delusion, the primordial, the subtle mistake. So in the teachings and the Lam Rim, there's these in the teachings of these, Buddha says, you know, this business of dependent arising, using the logic of dependent arising to chip away at, argue with, deconstruct, finally eliminate the misconception, which is exactly opposite to dependent arising. If everything is interdependent, then it's opposite to independent, isn't it? So the main delusion, they all use the terms Ignorance sees things as inherent. Ignorance sees things as intrinsic. Ignorance sees things as independent. Well, independence is a good one because it's opposite to interdependent, isn't it? So dependent arising or interdependence, things exist interdependently, and that argues with the instinctive belief that they exist independently. Independent of what? Buddha presents three things. There are millions of ways in which things exist interdependently. But here, in terms of arguments to chip away at the primordial delusion to get to realize emptiness, there are three levels of interdependence that he presents. And each of them is an argument with a previous view. You know? So the very first one. Okay, so we can discuss the cake, we can discuss the thermos, we can discuss our toe, whatever exists. Let's discuss the I. That's our favorite phenomenon on the planet. I. It's a central player in our head. I. So Buddha's saying that this marimpa, this ignorance, causes us to totally believe in the depths of our being that there is an I in here somewhere that's independent of causes, independent of its bits and pieces that make it up, and independent, finally, of the mind that labels it. These are progressive levels. But before we go into this, let's look at the word ignorance. It's a really powerful point. This is crucial to understand. If you say to me, what's 1 + 1, Ravina? If I have simple, ordinary ignorance, I would say, I don't know. That's ignorance. But that ignorance is really simple and easy to fix. If we had that ignorance about emptiness, or reality, we get enlightened in a couple of years, I think. But the ignorance we have is not only do we not know that 1 + 1 is 2, but we really believe it's 3. That's the trouble. And that's what we cling to like vampires. Not only do we not know the simple fact that 1 + 1 is 2, we believe a lie. That's the painful ignorance that causes us to cling. And that's why it's so painful and hard to rip it out of the mind. So here it's even more dramatic. Buddha's saying that an I and everything else exists interdependently. That an I exists interdependently. An I exists and depends upon causes, parts, and the mind. An I is a dependent arising. He says that's how it does exist. But we believe the exact opposite. I mean, it's the exact opposite, the diametric opposite. Not only do we not know that an I is a dependent arising, we believe the exact opposite. That's the lie that has to be ripped out. And then when you see the truth, all you're seeing is, oh, that I doesn't exist. How interesting. That's emptiness. So, okay, simple examples like this using this idea of, because, okay, let's look at the word emptiness then, because we find it very tricky, you know. Don't worry, my lolly, I think, don't worry. So, okay, let's look at this word emptiness. I think we really need to look at it carefully because we get very, very confused. As Lama Zopa says, there's ordinary emptiness. So let's use examples of ordinary emptiness. It's very easy. The examples I use all the time, you know. Let's say you're colorblind and you see every time black appears to you, you see pink. We get that. We understand the idea. You're colorblind. Paul Rabina is colorblind. So whenever black appears to you, you see pink. Now, even intellectually, you might know it's not pink, but because it only appears to you as pink, you keep forgetting, you know. Isn't it? That makes sense. So, in other words, your ignorance is decorating on top of a black thermos pink thermos. You're decorating a lie on top of what does exist, something that doesn't exist. We get that concept. So we know we can fix that. We can fix your eyes. We know the problem is your eyes. So we can fix your eyes. We get your eyes fixed. And we present the black thermos again. And we sort of assume you're going to go, oh, look at that, fancy that, it's black. No, 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 no. What will appear to you first, you get the shock of your life. You go, oh my God, it's not pink. Won't you say that? Oh my God, it's not pink. You'll say that. What you just saw then was the absence of pink. What you just saw then was the emptiness of pink. What you just saw then was the emptiness of pink. Can you hear that? Can you hear that? Obviously, it's true. If you think there's money in your bank, you're convinced it's $5,000, and you ask me to look in your bank, I'll tell you the truth. There's $0. I'll tell you that. I'm not, you know why? Because I'm not expecting. And this is why, this is so crucial. Why that shock is because you're expecting pink. Why the shock when you look in the bank and you're expecting 5,000, you get the shock of your life when you see 0 or 49, whatever the thing is, when it's not 5,000. So what you just saw was the absence of your precious $5,000. That's an ordinary emptiness. Okay, that's an emptiness that's not pleasant. That's all it means, is the absence of something. Don't make it holy. And the only person, this is so important, the only person who'll go, oh my God, it's not pink. In other words, who sees the absence of pink. In other words, who sees the emptiness of pink, is a person who thinks it was pink. Do you understand me? So the only person who's going to go, the yogi in the subtlest level of meditation, after eons of practicing and about thinking about dependent arising in their subtle meditation, finally one day the penny will drop and they'll go, and they will realize that there never has been, isn't, and never could be an inherent I. They see for the first moment the absence of what they believed in since beginningless time. So the emptiness is the absence of something you thought was there. It's not just, oh, there's no elephant in this room. Who cares? Nobody expected an elephant to be here. Technically, that is an absence. Do you understand? Another absence, an example, is there's no anger in my mind at the moment. Oh, I sound angry all the time. I know that, but I'm not. But there's no anger in my mind. That's an absence of anger. It's not clever. It's reasonable. Can you hear the point? It is true at this moment, there's no anger. So then in my mind, there is a phenomenon called the absence of anger. So that's an absence. That's an ordinary absence. You get that? We don't think this way. If I'm expecting tea in my cup, I go, oh, there's no tea. I just noticed the absence of tea. Now, the point I'm getting at is, when we hear emptiness, we go, oh, nothingness. You throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's not what's being said. It's not what's being said. So in other words, right back to the existent one, right? When you first study Dura, you learn phenomenon, blah, blah, blah. So there are different kinds of things that exist. The regular, ordinary, everyday, impermanent ones like red and white and blue and things, it's easy. But there are some, we know there are some abstract phenomena. I mean, mathematics talks about -2, right? I don't know what bloody -2 looks like, but it's a real phenomenon in math, isn't it? Do you get my point? It's a bit like that. So emptiness is like an absence of something. It's like a minus number. It's a bit in Buddhism, they call it permanent, but that throws us completely, so forget that. Alex Berzin calls it abstract. That's a good idea, a good approach. So if you look into the cup and, you're waiting for your tea, expecting my tea, and I go, oh God, there's no tea in my cup. Put it this way, what I've just observed is a phenomenon, an existent, established base, a phenomenon, an object called absence of tea. So you can say a phenomenon called the absence of tea exists in my cup. That's a fact. Can you hear that? It's not being clever, but it's leading us to understand how we get to see emptiness. So you can if there is tea there is tea in my cup. There is a phenomenon called tea in my cup. If there's no tea there, what you're observing, what you're observing is a phenomenon, a thing that does exist, which is called the absence of tea. So things exist, whatever can be cognized. Remember, whatever can be cognized by the mind is a phenomenon. So if you can cognize the absence of tea, then absence of tea is the name of a thing that exists. Can you hear this idea? Can you get that idea? Can you hear the concept? Not saying anything. I'm presuming you're understanding me. Okay. So you've got to get your head around that approach. So if you look at the bank example, what I just saw was 0. That's actually nihilism. That is, there's nothing. Dondrop looks in his bank. He is believing, he expects $5,000. He will get the shock of his life. So you listen to this. He maybe has to see for 1 second there's a zero there. That's really important. He's got to see it first, because how does he know otherwise there's no $5,000? So he has to see what really vividly appears to his mind. The object of knowledge, the existent that appears to his mind is a thing called the absence of his precious $5,000. That's very real. You know, if I live with Lou for 47 years and he's my boyfriend, right now I just expect Lou every day. There's Lou. Lou's in the house. And one day I come home and there's a note. I've left you for a younger version. I guarantee from then on, I will be vividly in that house, noticing the whole time the absence of Lou. It's a real phenomenon for me, isn't it? You won't notice the absence of Lou because you don't expect Lou if you come to visit me. So the absence of something is a tremendously powerful thing. We're living in absences. You know, you're missing, you think you should have more money. All you notice is the absence of money, the absence of people. That's what loneliness is. They're not the absences we like, but they're absences. They're phenomena. The mind can cognize them. Got to get your head like this, understand the use of the, then you begin to understand the concept of emptiness and how Buddha talks about it. Not seeing it as nihilism. They say the biggest mistake in the world in relation to emptiness is thinking it means nothingness. It's the worst mistake, the worst nihilism. Chuck the baby out the bathwater. Fall into the abyss of the great mistake, as Tsongkhapa said. You know? So the mind is always cognizing things, and you could argue this way: the mind is either cognizing nice, delicious, impermanent phenomena with shape and color and sound, or it's cognizing these abstract phenomena, as Berzin calls them. Makes sense. So there it is. So there's ignorance in the mind that believes that is projecting on top of what does exist something that doesn't exist. That's the ignorance that is the big trouble, the double trouble ignorance. So how do you eradicate it? And it's very logical. How do you eradicate it? How do you eradicate it? By seeing the truth. So if you're learning 1 + 1 is 2, you practice and practice and practice, and you prove it. You know, get 1 plus and then 1 and then equals 2. And you put 2. Ah, there it is. You put it together in your head first, conceptually. Let's just say you're practicing learning math. And you know, 1 + 1 is 2, yeah, you say it. You suddenly forget, you say 1 + 1 is 3. You know, Barbara says, don't be silly, Rabina, it's 3. I go, oh, you're right. A 2, you're right, it's 1 + 1 is 2. So when you've proved that and you're certain, before, when I had the thought, 1 + 1 is 3, it's a thought, isn't it? There is in my mind a thought and it's called 1 + 1 is 3. That's a thought. Then I rectified myself and I said 1 + 1 is 2 and I prove it to myself. So what happened to the previous thought? This is the whole point. The other thought disappeared into a puff of smoke. And what made it go was the buying into, the proving of, the accepting of the truth. 1 + 1 is 2. That's how you get enlightened. That is the method. One way of saying the entire method from here to Buddhahood of becoming a Buddha is removing from the mind the misconceptions. That's it. That's the method. And what's left is you reveal your Buddha mind. You put it like that. It's the job of removing the misconceptions. And what makes them go is the acknowledging of the valid conceptions. This is conceptual first. Then you prove it in subtle meditation. Finally have a non-conceptual, direct, experiential insight into that truth. And from that first second of non-conceptual insight into emptiness, you cut the root and you can't fall back. You have lots of more work to do, but you can't go back after that. This paradigm shift in your mind. What's the schedule today? Lou? Nice. Okay, so then look at this word again, word emptiness. It doesn't mean, we can be forgiven for thinking it means nothing. It sounds like it. Got to be very clear. Not saying that. So in the Heart Sutra, Buddha tells us very nicely this. It's very delicious, really. He says, he's telling us in a Heart Sutra, actually, Sharip, who is it? Avalokitesvara, the 10th level bodhisattva, is doing the words, but they're Buddha's thoughts. Buddha's in meditation, blissing out on emptiness, and he channels his thoughts into the minds of his disciples, and they have this conversation. And Shariputra asks a question, and Avalokitesvara gives the answer. He's in human form, 10th level bodhisattva, and he gives the answer. So most of the words are his mouth, but they're Buddha's teachings, right? So basically, the Heart Sutra, Buddha's just giving us this list of phenomena according to the Buddha's worldview, all the lists of phenomena, 5 aggregates, the 4 noble truths, the 18 constituents, all these things, all these bits and pieces that make up the Buddhist worldview. And then each of them have to use the same approach to realize the empty, something like that. So anyway, he says, almost at the beginning, he says, he uses the example of the first of the 5 aggregates. He says form. Form is the Buddha gave this teaching on how what makes up a person, also what makes up the universe of phenomena, impermanent phenomena, divided into 5 categories. But in terms of a person, he bundles us into 5 categories. First is form, which is the physical. But he uses form as an example. You can use anything. You can say eye there. You can say pink. You can say black. You can say kaka, whatever exists. You can say anything that exists. But he uses the word form. He says form. And he says, form is empty, emptiness is form. Form is nothing other than emptiness, and emptiness is nothing other than form. Something like that. All he's telling us, instead of thinking that emptiness is the opposite of form, form is an example of a conventional phenomenon. So right now we have conventional and we have ultimate. And we see them as opposite. We see them as completely opposite. He's telling us in the Heart Sutra they're not opposite. What he's telling us is form, a conventional thing called a form, is empty of inherent form. So the thing called form lacks a characteristic of being inherent form. So that form itself, right there on that form, there is a characteristic on that form right there of absence of inherent form. So form is empty. So emptiness is one thing and form is another. Emptiness of inherent form is a characteristic that exists. It exists. It can be cognized by the mind. Then you have to ask yourself, well, where does absence of inherent form exist? Well, not in the sky. Oh, there's no inherent form. Right there on the bloody form is where absence of inherent form exists. Right there. So you can't have form conventional without empty of inherent form, ultimate. You have to, so when you start to hear the 2 truths, instead of going the berserk opposite directions, you bring them towards the middle way. Then you're moving in the right direction. And finally, as a Buddha, these 2 will appear to you simultaneously. That's the final non-duality. So you're on the right track. If every time you hear conventional, you hear ha-ha, that means it's empty of existing from its own side. And every time you hear empty of existing from its own side, you hear ha-ha, that means it exists conventionally. Then you're on the right track. Otherwise, you're berserk. Moving off in la la land. Because when we hear empty, we throw the baby out of the bathwater, become nihilistic. Oh, there's nothing there, I might as well kill myself. Or as soon as we heard convention, as soon as we hear there is a conventional I, we go, oh, thank God there is something, grasp. And we live in la la land, Form is empty. You know what? Emptiness of inherent form is form. You can't find an emptiness of inherent form without a form. Okay, technically emptiness isn't form. There are 2 types of phenomena. Don't worry. You can't have one without the other. It's not possible. How the hell can you have emptiness of tea not in a cup, Where does emptiness of tea exist? In my cup. Not, oh, there's no tea. Got to pin it down. Everything that exists can be pointed to. Not ultimately. Emptiness of inherent I exists right here on the aggregates. Well, actually, as Rinpoche says, it's on the mere I. It's on the mere I. That's a whole different discussion. So the absence of something, okay, the simple example like the bank, that's easy. There is a bank. So there is Dundrup expecting $5,000, and he observes the absence of $5,000. Where is that absence of $5,000 existing. Not again, not in the sky. You know, oh, there's no $5,000 in the bank, precisely where he thought it was. So where will you find the emptiness of I? Exactly where you thought it was. Here, not in the chair, not in the toilet. Here. Two truths come together, kind of one without the other. It's ridiculous. So when you do the 4-point analysis in the Lamrim, we know this, the Lamrim tells us that the delicious methodology, you squeeze your brain, as Lama Zopa puts it. There are 4 points, the 4-point analysis, they say. The first one, okay, so Buddha's saying, sorry, honey child, there is no intrinsic I, okay? So you need to look for it, but don't believe me, I want you to look for it. So first you say the words, there is no inherent I. So then you first you have to establish, then he says you've got to look for it, okay? You've got to look for it. So the first thing is to establish, this is a really major point, and this is the main one, that if you get this, as Lama Zopa says, if you've got this, you clearly have identified the object to be negated, you will, that next millisecond, you'll realize the emptiness of it. So the locating it, so the identifying of what you think does exist, identifying clearly what you think does exist. When you've done that, you've already realized emptiness, practically next second. So this is the hardest job, the first point. So this just sounds very tricky because he's already telling us there's no inherent I, and then he says you've got to work out what you think the inherent I looks like. It's very hard because we have a very vivid feeling for the presence of an intrinsic I. Just we've never articulated it, we've never identified it. So first you have to establish what you think you're looking for. Then you have to do the looking, and you have to establish the parameters of your search. Well, there's only 2 options. There's only 2 options of what could exist. So where you have to first look is the aggregates, of course. You don't look for the I in a chair. You have to look at the aggregates, among the aggregates, the 5 aggregates. So and you establish that. So here it is here, the 5 aggregates. So either there's 2 options. The first one is you have to look for an I, which you try to establish what you think it looks like. It exists separately from all the other parts. Because we know that this is the second level of dependent arising. The first one is that I is the result of causes. The second one here is the tasty one. It's the I exists in dependence upon its bits and pieces. Everything that exists, every phenomenon that exists, including permanent ones, including abstract ones, exists in dependence upon their bits and pieces. Everything, and this is arguing with the Hindus that say there's a permanent, intrinsic, partless thing, God is one of those, a soul is one of those. No, Buddha says, can't be possible, not viable. So the first argument is we have to look for, and then establish the absence of a piece in here that isn't the other pieces. And if there are millions of pieces, okay, we know you're made of many parts. And we believe utterly, because of this ego grasping, we believe utterly that there is in here, along with the breast and the pee-pee and the caca and the toenail and the eyelash and the anger and the love and the compassion, must be millions of parts that make up a person. That one of those parts, a very special part, the boss part with a capital letter with shiny halo on it, it's called I. Our language tells us that. I have a nose. This is one of the good arguments. It's such a tasty argument. I will tell you, I have a thermos. People will say you should drink more water. Every day I promise to drink more water, every day I forget. Maybe why I have snotty nose, I never drink enough water. Is that right? If I drank enough water, would I keep having a snotty nose? For 2 years I lived here, but never proved it. Would that be an antidote to snotty nose? Having gallons of water? No, I don't know. Anyway, I never get to the point. I always forget, buddy. Leave it. Don't worry about it. Leave it, Victor. So I'm telling you, I have got I'll make a statement, okay? Conventional statement. I have a tissue and a thermos. Now, if you speak English and you hear sounds coming from over here, you will look in this direction and you will establish the truth, the conventional reality of what I said. And so it does help to speak the truth, doesn't it? If I said, I have an elephant, you lock up poor Rabina. Do you understand? So you can prove this is true conventionally. It's very simple. The point is this. How many phenomena did I mention? I mentioned a tissue, 1. I, 2, 3, a thermos. There are 3 phenomena, and this is a simple point. If that's a true statement, you have to see that there are 3 separate, and in this case also independent things. And that means, in this case, that each of them doesn't exist, doesn't depend upon the other for its existence. This is a simple example of independent and separate. Easy peasy to prove. There will be a thermos, a tissue, and a Rabina. And if you break the thermos, Rabina is still intact. If you break the tissue, the thermos is fine. They are separate and independent. It's easy. And that's truth. That's fact. You can prove it. Now, I'll make another statement that sounds similar, but it's more nuanced. I have a nose and an ear. So without analysis, it's really obvious. It's true, isn't it? You look over here and you see a nose and an ear. No problem. But the trouble is, at the same time, we believe that there are 3 phenomena there. We believe there's an ear, and we believe there's a nose, and the third one, we believe there's an eye that isn't the nose and isn't the ear. We just assume it. We don't know this. We don't prove it, but we have to prove that that's impossible. Like Lama Zopa said, let's say, Lou says, oh, Rabina, I don't like your nose. And so I say, how dare you insult me? Of course we'll say that. There's another more subtle one. This is the next point, actually, the third one. But here, Lama Zopa says, if there is an eye that's separate, if there is a little eye in there separate somewhere, when he says that, the little eye will go, oh, thank goodness Lou didn't insult me. Poor ear must be feeling very unhappy. We laugh at that. But it's fact. If there is an I, a piece called I, which we speak as if there were, as an owner, a boss that runs the show. If there were that, like a boss, when you punch the staff member, the boss might have empathy, but the boss doesn't feel it. So the same, if the ear, who is the possession of the eye, gets punched, the eye might have empathy, but won't feel it. But we know, we say, I am in pain. So the more subtle point here is that, as Rinpoche says, the eye is not the ear, but they have a very dependent relationship. They're not separate, but they are not the same. They're not independent, but they're not the same. These other 3 is easy. This one's more nuanced, This is really getting clear thinking about what a thing that exists means. We're very vague about all this. This is really clinical thinking, So one of the meditations they say to do, you imagine all your millions of pieces and you start deconstructing this shape, this person here. You deconstruct all the pieces in your search for the piece called I that's in there running the show, the boss. So the logic is you keep deconstructing, putting all the pieces out, all the physical bits, all the mental bits. And the logic is if you throw out all the parts that make up of I, if there is an I, you will find it sitting there naked going, oh, you found me. Buddha says you won't. So he's saying not only is there not one, honey child, you don't need one. So I use the other example of IKEA. I love IKEA example. You look on the internet, there's a delicious loo there, oh, I'm going to buy a loo. So you go, they'll give you a bloody box full of parts. You've got to build your own eye. When you're putting the bits together, and this is the interesting point. Everything that exists has to have a function. You define it, you give it its conventional characteristics, And then you say, what is it? It has to have a function. You can't just go, oh, there's an ooh, ah, because I believe it. Don't talk rubbish. You have to prove it. It has to have a function. It must have a function. It must have a function. So IKEA has learned how to make a table. They know exactly how many screws, exactly how many legs. They don't give you 7.5 screws that you vaguely share. You don't have 7.5 legs and you think they built a table with exactly the right pieces. Each piece works harmoniously, interdependently to function. And then they throw the pieces apart and put them in a box. The same with the eye. So you start building the eye, and each part in there, the millions of parts, there has to be each one working beautifully. And that's why if you have an imbalance of the elements, that's when the pieces that shouldn't be there, like 3 knees instead of 2. Each piece has its function. Each piece does its job. So when you build the eye, you're building up the pieces, and you're getting nervous because you've got the legs on, the liver's there, the heart's there, all the bits and pieces are there. But you keep worrying about where the bloody eye is. You can't see, and you ring up panic to IKEA. There's no eye. Oh, don't worry, Irina. We know you don't need one, honey. It's okay. And you know why? This is the point. This is the point. This is the point. This is the point. All those pieces together, working beautifully, function as the eye. We embellish it with an extra piece called an eye. It's unnecessary, completely and totally unnecessary. You don't need a boss. That's why the same concept as a creator. The dualistic views that they have as the concept of a creator, the boss that runs the show, and the concept of an I that runs the show here. It's the same concept philosophically. And it's an addition. It's an addition. It's extra. It's not necessary. It's an embellishment. We don't need a boss here or the universe. The Hindus say the world is so amazing there has to be an architect. Not necessary. That's the embellishment. You don't need a boss. If you want a boss, it's the mind. And in the mind, if you want a boss, the very first step is intention. I will, volition. All the parts working together, the table or the eye, all the parts working together function as a table, function as an eye. You don't need an extra piece called an eye. So you've got to look in this analysis, the second one, you have to discover with confidence upon searching among all those parts, there is no part called I that's independent of the other parts. But there is an I, is the point. It's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That exists interdependently upon the parts. This is leaping to the end. But the third argument, the third of the 4, is the more subtle one, and this is the one that gets us finally to the proper realization. That the other mistake we make is that the I am the I. All my parts is the I. This is I. So here we have to start seeing how there can't be an I that's oneness with the parts. The previous one is an I that's separate from the parts. This is more subtle. This is more nuanced. We have to prove how the I, that the parts can't, the name, the label can't be the base, as Lama Zopa says. So I is the name. This is the final one we get to. This leads us to that. You prove that the parts is not the same as the I. And this leads us just naturally to the conclusion that I is the name we impute upon the parts. So they say the greatest yogi, the yogi in the meditation, single point of concentration, finally the penny drops and they see nakedly the absence. They notice vividly the absence of what they have thought since beginningless time has existed there, but it has never, isn't, and could never. Then they realize the absence. That then they realize subtle dependent arising. It's merely labeled. That's realized after emptiness, apparently. That comes from natural conclusion when you've discovered there is no I, oneness with the parts. The label can't be the base. That Rabina is the name, and the name is imputed upon the parts. Cup is the name, and it's imputed upon the parts. The cup is easy. Cup, we say my thermos, it's not that many parts, right? It's got a base and it's got sides. Forget the lid, you know? We say there's my, so you're looking for the inherent thermos, which you think is there too. So you start pulling the parts apart. It's easy. You take away the base, you take away the sides, forget the lid, you take away the base, you take away the sides, you have two parts, right? So if there was an intrinsic thermos, you'd find a third piece there. But we know there's not. It's very clear there's no inherent thermos. It's very clear that the thermos is not the parts. How can the thermos be the parts? Because thermos is a name, is a term. The thermos, the name, thermos, we think it's inside, it's in the parts, you know. So you take away this part, well, there's a thermos. So you must have two thermoses because there's a part. So you must have 40 million eyes because each part is the eye. So if, and this is the point, if two things are synonymous, if they have the same meaning, different definition, same meaning, if I and nose are the same, then I and nose are the same. They're one piece. They're one thing. There won't be two. There's one thing. So I is the nose. But what about your ear? Where does that fit? Oh, it's confusing. I must have a second eye, you know. If something exists, it has to be it's got to be separate from something else. So this is where it's more nuanced. There is an I. It's dependent upon the parts, but it's not separate from or oneness with. It's not separate from or oneness with. It's a name. Just squeeze our brains, as Lama says. Should have had a tea break. Sorry, you needed a tea break or a pee-pee break, isn't it? Sorry. Put in one end and out comes the other. I should have left space for that. Sorry. So any questions then? Any questions? Sorry, I've talked a bit long. I'm so sorry. Any questions at all? So knowing all this, I mean, I know this stuff intellectually, but I haven't got experience yet. Believe me, I still believe there's a bloody eye in here. Promise you. You punch me, you'll see how I respond. You got to say so, and I know some words. Hopefully they're true. I haven't misled you. Have I spoken the truth? Back there, Rebecca. What's your name, Rebecca? Rachel. Have I spoken the truth, Rachel? She studied far more than me, so she can prove I'm speaking the truth or not. What? I don't know anything wrong. She's just proved I'm speaking the truth. And she studied more than me, so it's she's a valid person. She's valid because she can prove anyway, in my words maybe. We've got to unpack all this. I mean, all these words, it's true, we have to use the words the holy beings use. We've got to find ways to use examples for ourselves though, you know, to keep it on the earth. Otherwise it's too in the head. It's too much in the head, you know. We've got to study the words. But as Lama Zopa says, emptiness is all about life, not something in the books, not some intellectual, clever words in the books. We get so carried away. We're talking about life, right here, now, me, right now. So important. So are there any questions, please? Come on. Well, maybe just have a lunch break. It's a bit early. Is lunch coming? Oh, okay. So we can have lunch early. We can have an early lunch. Oh, okay, fine. Oh, I see. He went into. Oh, good. Okay, I understand. So we'll wait then. Okay. Are there any things to discuss? Any questions? Carol wants to ask a question. Yes, sweetheart.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, sweetheart. I can hear you loud and clear.
Cool. Well, first, I just want to say that I love your voice. You have such a beautiful chanting whenever that you do that.
Okay. Okay, darling.
And then the second thing is that I wanted to say I wasn't able to attend your Zoom teaching yesterday, and I'm wondering if you could maybe send us the Lama Zopa, the Amitabha verses and chanting.
Yes, I see. You were going to email me, Carol. And I would then send it to you. Did you email me already?
Yeah, I emailed you 2 days ago.
Okay, what was the email address that you used? Because I don't think I've received it. What is the email address that you used, sweetheart?
I think it's your your AOL account or something, right? I could double
No,
check.
it's not, darling. It's robinacortin@mac.com.
Mac.com.
Mac like the computer. Mac like the computer. robinacortin@mac.com.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that is the one.
Well, I'll look again in my emails. I'll check it out later, sweetheart. I'll let you know. Okay, darling. I'll let you know, sweetheart.
Okay, and then just for your information, for the subject of the email, I put May 22nd.
All right, sweetheart. Thank you so much. Thank you, darling. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, darling. Thank you, darling. Anybody have any questions? Anything to discuss? Yes, darling.
Question.
Okay. Mike, darling.
I talk in here.
Yeah, onto the mic. It's a mic. They need to hear it. The Zoom people need to hear you. It's a microphone.
Okay. I
It's
have a
supposed to be on
really,
my face, but I don't like it.
I have a really
Speak into it, sweetheart. Close to your mouth.
It's right
Bring it
there.
close to your mouth. That pointy thing is a microphone.
This one.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a really dumb question. I don't know if you already addressed it or not, but is the inherent I empty?
The way you say that word is as if there isn't such a thing as an inherent I. So no, the inherent I is not empty because there's no such thing as an inherent I. It's only things that exist that is empty. Whatever, you have to first, an inherent I doesn't exist. You can argue that a non-existent is empty of inherent existence, yes. But generally speaking, you can say there's no such thing. Listen. There's no such thing as an inherent I, so no, it's not empty. An I that does exist is empty, yes. Dependent arising I doesn't exist. I mean, the words, it's no point just getting caught up in the words if we're not used to them. Otherwise, it's just like gobbledygook, you know. That's why like if you have to learn IT, as soon as someone starts talking IT, I'm lost because I don't know the names and I don't know the definition. But we can learn it, you know. So we've got to learn these words. It helps us. It helps us. Then we can start to think stuff through, you know. Do you understand? Get the definitions clear. Do you understand?
I'm doing my best.
Good, sweetheart. We all do, I know. But get the broader point. The broader point is that Buddha's telling us that in our mind, there are a series of misconceptions. There are states of mind that have no basis in reality. And that's the key thing to get. And that's why starting with the emotional afflictions, like attachment and aversion, they're relatively easy in comparison. We can easily see how we decorate on top of the cake, this deliciousness that isn't in the cake. Because if the deliciousness were in the cake, after 5 pieces, the next piece would still look divine and delicious, but we know it looks repulsive. So delicious is a distorted projection coming from emotional hunger we dump onto the cake. And then aversion is another emotional quality resulting in attachment, not getting what it wants when your husband's mean to you. So with these two, we can begin to see how their lives. This is really helpful. This prepares us for the more subtle, but effectively the same way it functions. They don't say it quite like this, but it's like this. They're all wrong views. Technically speaking, they're all a view. In our head, there are millions of viewpoints about things, and we've got to establish the ones that are valid. And this is not surprising. It's not surprising in science. We know you can't just say, oh, I prefer to think 1 + 1 is 3. No, we know you can't say that. We have proven within the body of knowledge called math that 1 + 1 is 2. So here, within the reality of the universe, we're looking at what exists and what doesn't according to this particular model, Buddha's way of presenting it. You can just, if you want Jesus' view, you're very welcome. It's a whole different kettle of fish. You know, it's a different discussion, different approach. Buddha's saying we suffer because we have misconceptions in our mind. We believe in things that don't exist, basically. It's such an easy way to put it. It's kind of really exciting. It's tasty. You have to prove it to be true, you know. And the simple things. Then we can get to this one. Any questions?
Victoria has her hand raised.
Victoria, good sweetheart, talk to me.
Venerable, I don't have a question. I just want to let you know that the wisdom of AI says that if you are better hydrated, your mucous membranes will like your nose better and you'll likely be less snotty.
Oh, so if I had more drinks, so I have more water. Okay, I'll see if I can do about, I'll try and drink 8 liters today and see if it works. Thank you. Thank you, Victoria. I'm very encouraged. Thank you, darling. I love it. Okay, good. Go on, Jennifer. What's your question?
So
Hello,
is the main thing to understand about emptiness is that everything is a projection or a label coming from my mind? Is that the main gist about it?
You could, yeah, but not, no, that it's true, but there's a bit extreme because when we say everything is merely coming from my mind, we can sort of then misunderstand that nothing exists. But we've got to see the two truths. And the way Lama Zopa puts it is this, is very tasty. We got to see that when we speak about conventional existence, a flat-bottomed metal container that keeps my tea warm, that is a valid cognition, and we prove it by putting the tea in and keeping it warm. So we can say that does exist. And then we can have to look for the inherent keeper of warm tea. And then when we can prove, as Rinpoche says, we finally proved that there's no inherent thermos from its own side. There's not an atom of anything in the thermos that makes it a thermos. That from the side of the thermos, it is completely lacking in anything. And he says here, but he says, but when we've realized that, it's so subtle, it's as if there's no thermos. But conventionally, there is a thermos that does keep my tea warm. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't exist. So these are the two we have to keep. All the time, emptiness has to be seen in reference to dependent arising. Otherwise, we sail off into the abyss of the great mistake. And then we get caught up in what does exist. We can over-exaggerate it and cling to it and make it kind of permanent, you know. So we've got to see these two all the time informing each other, keep us grounded in the two truths.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why it's so helpful, I think, the two truths. Yeah, clear? Okay. Erin, yes, sweetheart.
Hi, Venerable. Can you hear me?
I can, sweetheart.
Not? Sorry,
Good, I can hear you, sweetheart.
you can?
Yeah.
Okay, I think it was my headphones. Sorry about that.
Good.
Okay. So if I sort of understand this like intellectually, it doesn't, what do you do to use it? You know what I mean? Like, I'm still afraid if I encounter a tiger, or, you know, I still want the chocolate cake, even if I understand that
Sure.
maybe the I is a
Yeah,
construct.
exactly. Then question.
Pardon?
What's the question from that? And good, I hear you well and true. So okay, so no, I understand you. So it's a bit like it's a bit like you've never made a cake, but you can write down very nicely a theory about cakes. You can learn all about the function of the flour and the function of the eggs and the function of the heat. You can learn very sophisticated theory about cakes, couldn't you? You could do that, couldn't you? And even understand how they all work. But it takes you time to make the cake. It takes you time to get it right. Everything is like that. You start with a theory. Even 1 + 1 is 2. When you're a little girl, it sounds so complicated. But then you've got to give it space and time to go home and prove it. But in order to prove it experientially, you've got to have the right words. That's the crucial point. If you think vaguely that 1 + 1 is 3, you can sit there in your homework for 10,000 years and you'll never get an answer. So it's why having the thoughts, be happy you have an intellectual understanding, but don't leave it there. And then you and there's always a disconnect. I mean, you could pass the exam in the best possible way and the best debater on the planet about emptiness and still have nowhere near a direct realization. That's not wrong. It takes time for the penny to drop.
Okay.
You understand? So be happy you understand intellectually. And every day you try to use that logic to chip away. Every time you feel the I rising, or every time you feel the attachment hungry for the cake, you don't leave it in the books, you apply it right there. Attachment's a fantasy, Erin. I'm exaggerating it. Even though you're hungry for it, desperate, you can't wait, you use the analysis right there.
Okay.
When you're frightened, when you nearly get killed on the car and the I rises like a tiger, panic stricken, you catch it. You catch it. I'm only feeling this fear because I believe there's an I. You know, you just use whatever logic you can. And slowly, this chips away. And eventually you get the experience. It takes time, but have confidence in the process.
Okay, is there meditation and practice?
Well,
Does that all?
meditation just means you're familiarizing your mind. So millions of them, of course. You take the information. There's one kind of meditation where you just concentrate, and that's not using thoughts. But the other kind is where you utilize, you learn this information, and you take it and sit on your cushion and think it through logically. That's meditation.
Okay,
Not mystical. Do you understand?
thank you.
Okay. What else? Okay, just to summarize a little bit, it's really important, like I said, to get our head around the use of the word emptiness or absence or lack of. It just means that. And look at your daily life. We really do live in absence, which is why we're so miserable. Of course, this absence here, Lama Zopa says when the greatest yogis discover the absence of the inherent I, they experience utter bliss and joy. The lesser yogis have the worst fear they've ever experienced. So that discovering the absence of an I is to bring bliss. So like, let's say you've been to the doctor and she says you've got cancer. Of course, you're panic stricken. You're despairing. You've got cancer. You're going to die. You're saying goodbye to everybody. And then she sees you again, says, I gave you the wrong x-rays. You don't have cancer. Well, the recognition right then is what you just had is of the absence of cancer. And you'd be blissed out. So that's a happy absence. It's a happy emptiness. Do you understand me? But the general idea of the absence of something, we're so familiar with it. Expect your tea, you're disappointed because there's no tea. That's seeing the absence of tea, the absence of the money. Or you're just thinking, I wish I had more money. Then all you feel is the absence of what you think you should have. We can hear how they're fabrications. We can hear how they're fabrications. Do you understand me? So it's a very common thing. And these are ordinary absences, ordinary emptinesses. They're real, but just get the idea when you get back to what exists, and there are phenomena, and by definition, what the mind always has to have a thing that it cognizes. Mind is subject, and whatever it cognizes is known as an object. So, you know, color is an object. Thermos is an object. Absence of money in the bank is an object. It exists. Your mind can cognize it. So in that sense, it's something that exists that your mind can grab hold of. It's in that way you say it exists. It's helpful because the mind's always cognizing an object. Can you hear those words? That's how to think. You know? Get used to that thinking. Then you can utilize the idea of absence, of emptiness, more simply, rather than just thinking it's a nothingness, sort of vaguely nothingness. You know, that's just like demented, meaningless, foolish. Time to have a break. Time for lunch. So have your lunch and think of it as having no. So how you practice it with lunch, okay?